Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks for William & Mary. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Day 2 of William & Mary's 5th Annual Professional Development Week. This year's programming is intended for the whole William & Mary community of students, alumni, faculty, staff, parents, and friends. We will cover a variety of topics relevant to people at all points of their career journey. And our discussions are rooted in the National Association of Colleges and Employers Career Competencies. They are career and self-development, communication, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology. We are truly grateful for the continued engagement of our William & Mary community to support one another's professional success. And I want to acknowledge and thank all of the William & Mary Professional Networks leaders, speakers, and William & Mary colleagues who provided the guidance, support, and expertise to make this week possible. I'd like to specifically thank Kelly O'Shaughnessy, Associate Director of Career Engagement, who partnered with me this year to curate a week of relevant topics and learning objectives for our William & Mary community. We began the week by focusing on the importance of growing your brand and LinkedIn tricks to recession-proof your career. Today, we started with a panel of HR leaders discussing workforce trends impacting careers in today's changing economy. And now we will be led through a series of exercises that will help us gain clarity on our values, strengths, and skills. Before I turn things over to our guest speaker, I just have a few technology items to cover. Today's session is being recorded, and we will notify all registrants once the recording is available. Questions are welcome, and we will address as many questions as time will allow. If you roll over the bottom portion of the Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. Please use that feature to submit your questions, and we will monitor the Q&A and chat throughout the hour. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Terry McDougall. Terry is an executive coach and leadership consultant who works with high-achieving professionals to help them unlock the full potential of themselves and their teams. Prior to becoming a full-time coach in 2017, she was a longtime marketing leader in financial services. She is the best-selling author of The Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms, and the host of the podcast, Winning the Game of Work. Thank you so much, Terry, for your continued support of the William & Mary community. Please take it away.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's so great to be here again with you. And hello to everyone who's on the webinar today. So I wanted to ask a question to get started. And if you wouldn't mind just popping your ideas into the chat. In your mind, what is the first step that you should take when you're starting a job search? And I'm going to take a look at the chat if I can get to it. Research, self-evaluation, figure out what you want to do. Take some time off. I love that. Yes. Know what's important to you. Getting started. Yep. Personal inventory. Network. Yeah, for sure. Determine what you're looking for. Some time for reflection. Yeah, you guys don't need this webinar. As an executive and career coach, a lot of times what people start with is updating their resume. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I'm trying to get the slides to it. There we go. But really, your job search doesn't start with your resume. I've had countless conversations with people that will reach out to me and say, "Do you write resumes?" And I always start with, yes, but that's not where we start. We do start with, who are you? What do you want? What are your strengths? And then once you decide that, and then you can start updating your resume. But so as so many of you smart people already know, your job search starts with you. Now, this slide that I'm sharing here is actually from a great book that I would recommend called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And there's this whole idea of your zone of genius. And as you can see, it's a Venn diagram. And, there are things that you can do. Like, for example, I'm competent. I can clean my bathroom. I'm able to do that. Am I skilled at it? I don't want to be skilled at it. I am not a cleaner. But there are things that I am skilled at. And then there's things that I'm just naturally gifted at, as each of you are. And, a lot of times people will look at job listings and they'll say, oh, I could do that. I could do that. Yeah. Um, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should be going after because, you have to have the energy to continue doing the thing that you get a job at. And typically, things that we're skilled at and that we really enjoy doing, the things that come easily to us, are things that we're probably going to have more resilience and more, happiness and satisfaction doing. So, this is just a good thing to think about. To think about, like, okay, what can I do? What am I able to do in terms of skills, and what are things that just come to me very naturally? Because when you can find things that are sort of right here in this overlap, that's where you're probably going to have the most success and happiness in your career. So we're going to spend the rest of this time talking about the SOAR model. And, most of you are probably familiar with the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is just a little more positive take on that type of analysis. So I would encourage you each to get out a pad of paper and, take some notes as we go through each of these slides. But before I advance, I just want to see if there's anything that has come up in the chat. Okay, so let's see if I can get this to, okay, so strengths. So take some time to think about, what do you excel at? What can you build on? Things that you already know how to do. What makes you unique? What do your friends and families and coworkers say to you and say, you're better at that than most people are? Sometimes people, and you may be one of these people, you don't recognize what your strengths are because they come to you, your ability to do these things comes to you so easily. When you think back over your life, what are some of your most proudest accomplishments? And what differentiates you? I guess that's another way of saying what makes you unique. Um, Again, I'd invite you to pop some things in the chat in terms of, what are some things that you're good at that maybe other people aren't? Oops. Don't be shy. What are you guys good at? Are you good at connecting? Are you good at creating? Are you good at organizing, juggling responsibilities, helping others, storytelling and copywriting, maintaining a positive attitude? That's priceless. Problem solving. Yeah, I have this saying that I use with um, my clients in coaching, which is, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. A lot of times we're so close to our own strengths that to us we're kind of like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, everybody can do that. And the reality is that's not the case. So as you're answering these questions for yourself, I would also suggest that you talk to people that know you well and ask these questions. Ask them to answer these questions on your behalf as well, because you may uncover some things that you think are no big deal that are actually superpowers. So, okay, so now we're going to go on to opportunities. So when you have made that list of your strengths and you've asked others, like, hey, what am I really good at? Start thinking about how these things can be used. Sometimes you may be in a role and you use a lot of your strengths and skills in that role, but maybe you want to do something different. And a lot of times, the skills that you have could be transferable, but maybe you're not aware of that. So it's just important to kind of stand there in those with those strengths and maybe do a bit of a 360 and to look around and say, where else can these strengths be used? And get creative. Try to, when you're brainstorming around this, don't limit yourself. Also, ask yourself, where are these strengths used today? Like, you may use them at work, but also think like, are you using them in a volunteer capacity? Are you using them at home? Or maybe you have some strengths that you're using in one of those areas that potentially could be used in a job. So, think broadly about that. And also think about, what are the opportunities that you have to use these strengths. Um, Maybe there might be opportunities at your current employer to maybe step out of the role that you're in. Sometimes we work for companies that have, they obviously, every company, every organization has lots of different roles, and maybe you're in a role that doesn't take advantage of some of your strengths. So you could look around and see if there's an opportunity to use them elsewhere. And then if you think about, threats, or something that might not, you might not initially think of as an opportunity, think about, how can that be reframed as an opportunity. So let me just think about what an example of that might be. Um, if you say worked at an advertising agency and you were, not super creative, you might say, well, that's going to hurt me. But the reality is that maybe that can be reframed to say that, okay, if you're surrounded by a lot of really creative people, well, maybe they need somebody to hold them to task. Maybe they need somebody to pay attention to, like, are we following the rules? Um, you know, are we working within budgets, et cetera? So, just think about how you can reframe things that you know how to do as an opportunity. Okay, now onto the A part of SOAR. So when you're looking for jobs, I mean, it can be really easy to like just jump onto LinkedIn or Indeed and just start like paging through the jobs. But before you do that, just think in a very, I guess, open-ended way, what could be. Ask yourself, have the courage to ask yourself, like a wave a magic wand, what type of role would I like to be in? What would I like to be doing? If you can start with that, and don't limit yourself when it comes to um, brainstorming, the reality is that your dreams could come true, but you've got to get clear on what they are first. So, what are your values and your passions? Sometimes you can take things that maybe it's a hobby, or it's something like that you like to do from a volunteer standpoint, and you might be able to weave an aspect of that into what you do for a living, but you've got to really start imagining it first. When you think about, what are some of the goals or achievements that you'd like to experience in your next job? Like, really do some introspection and come up with that. What kind of a difference would you like to make? Everybody has their different things that they want to get out of a job. Some people really value flexibility. Other people want to make a lot of money. Other people want to make a difference. Maybe they want to work for a nonprofit and make a difference in the world. Just start asking yourself these questions, like, what is it that you would like to do? And then when you think about, what your goals are, what are projects or tasks that could support your goals? So for example, if you um, maybe want to you're at a crossroads and you want to kind of make a pivot in your career, so maybe you don't have all of the experience that you might need in the role that you want to move into, you might be able to do some things on the side. You might be able to volunteer to sort of like build your case for how you could make that pivot. So this is all about possibilities, but get in touch with it. It's well worth you getting to be in touch with the things that you want, because that's the first step to making it happen. So, results. Start thinking about what success looks like for you. What can you do to make this vision tangible? Um, Sometimes it can be helpful to maybe like make a vision board. If you're familiar with what vision boards is, it's like a collaging exercise where you might look online for photos and print them out, or look in magazines and cut out pictures of things that appeal to you, things that you'd like to have in your life, and put them on a board that you have in front of you, so that you can really be focusing on the things that you want out of, not only out of your career, but out of life. Um, and think about, how will you know when you succeeded? I graduated in 1986, and that I can't. It's so hard to believe that it's been that long. But when I first started my own career, I had some, I think I wanted to be like a marketing coordinator. I think that was my aspiration, was to be a marketing coordinator. I eventually rose to lead marketing for several businesses, and it's funny, like when you have certain goals, and then you achieve them, you have to always be thinking about, like, okay, well, what's my next goal? But also to think about, like, how will I know when I have succeeded? Um, and I think that it's also really helpful to always be doing these exercises, because you're growing and you're learning, you're evolving. And maybe the things that you wanted, like me when I was 22, the things that I wanted when I was 22, it changed a lot, it evolved quite a lot. And so while I said at the beginning, like, don't start with updating your resume. Eventually, you're going to have to do that, of course, but make sure that you understand the person that you are um, that you are representing with that resume. So this is part of the reason why we do this exercise. So I'm just going to check to see if we've got any. Oh, okay, great. I'm taking a look at the Q&A. Any tips on quieting the inner critic, the realist that reels in your aspirations before you get to form them? Um, so Harper, I would say that it doesn't hurt to dream. There will be a time when you look at what your aspirations are, and you make a decision that, oh, like, what's my plan going to be based on this? So it might not be easy to do it, because I mean, I went to William and Mary, and so I know how important, and actually I also coach high achievers, and high achievers become high achievers because they are keyed in on wanting to understand what the expectations are of other people of them. And of course that's important, but I think it's just as important for you to key in. It's actually more important for you to key in on, what do I want out of my life and out of my career. The bottom line is that if you don't allow yourself to dream that, and express it in some way, it's not going to happen. These things don't happen accidentally. Um, if you lean in and you're able to express the thing that you want, it's not guaranteed that it will happen, but the chances of it happening are a lot greater. So Harper, if you can just maybe give yourself, say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours just dreaming and writing down the things that I want. I think what you're going to find is that you'll probably feel pretty excited. And then later you can look at that, maybe put it away, and a day or two later go back and say, okay, well, if this is what I want, what's my plan look like for how I'm going to get there? So if you have any follow-up questions or anything, just let me know, but hopefully that was helpful. Um, okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, so related to this SOAR exercise that we went through, I think it's really helpful to also do a values assessment. And I was talking with Kelly before we went live on this workshop, and she shared with me that William and Mary has some resources that are available to do a values exercise. And it's something that I do with my coaching clients as well. And one of the here is I've included here a link to an online free values assessment. This isn't one that it doesn't have anything to do with me, but I did some research and I thought it was a pretty good one. Um, just to give you a little bit of a caveat, though, one thing that I have seen with myself and I've seen with a lot of my clients, and I wouldn't doubt that if you do your values exercise, you're going to find the same thing, is that you can have conflicting values. I mean, I've coached many people who, one of their top values is high achievement, is making a lot of money, is getting promoted, um, while at the same time, they might want adventure and time with family and, good health, fitness. And clearly these can be conflicting values. And so it's not, there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to make a lot of money and I want to have time with my family, just as an example. But if you're not intentional about, first of all, recognizing that you might have conflicting values, but also just recognizing that there are going to be trade-offs sometimes. But if it rises to the level of consciousness, and then at least you can consciously make decisions about, you know what, I'm going to take off early today to go to my son's soccer game, but I have to let him know that I'm going to miss something next week because I have a business trip, right? Like if you can address it, it's going to make it a lot easier, to, rather than ending up in divorce court or something because you weren't intentional about the trade-offs. Um, okay. Okay. So we're on to this next, and Harper, this might be helpful for you, as a follow-up to your question. Once you've done that brainstorming and you have, really, opened your heart and your mind to all the possibilities, then after you've done that and you've got your wish list, like, hey, I want to go and, you know, I don't know, whatever it might be, right? Like start your own business or, go and be Mark Zuckerberg's right-hand man. I don't know, whatever it might be. Start thinking about like what jobs exist that might align with your zone of interest or your zone of genius. Who do you know who could tell you more about that role or that industry? I actually had Michael on my podcast to talk about the importance of networking. And, I know for a lot of people that networking it can seem scary, and particularly if you're early in your career, that you see like somebody that went to William and Mary who's like an SVP or runs their own business. It might seem intimidating to reach out to them, or you might not even know what to say. Um, I've found that when you've decided that, like, hey, or you think you might be interested in something, but you're not sure, one of the best ways of exploring that is to find somebody who's doing that job or is working in that industry already and to reach out to them and just say, hey, could I have 15 or 20 minutes of your time? I'm really interested in what you're doing. I think it might be a path that I'd be interested in exploring, and I'd like to learn more about it. I think that sometimes people get nervous about networking because they feel like they're going to have to ask somebody to help them or help them get a job or something like that, and that's actually not something that you should do. A lot of times if you reach out and you show interest in what somebody's doing, and you really have some genuine interest and you want to ask them some questions, people are actually usually pretty interested in talking about or sharing the lessons that they've learned in their career, or sharing what it's like to work in their industry, or what it took to get to where they are. People, I'll just be frank, they usually like talking about themselves if people show interest. But if you show genuine interest, a lot of times they will actually offer to help. But if you approach people with like, hey, do you have a job that or can I send you my resume? That puts people on the defensive, and they, a lot of times, they kind of clam up then. Um, all right. So when you're exploring options, look around and, even friends of friends or, um, look at LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, see if there are people that are doing things that are interesting to you. If you work in, like I worked in marketing in my career, and I worked primarily in financial services. I was a member of the American Marketing Association. I was a member of the Financial Communicator Society. These are great places to find people who maybe are doing things that you might be interested in. A lot of times um, they might have like workshops or networking events where you can go and find people that you can learn from. Um, Books, I actually have a list of books that I'll share on a slide in a couple minutes. Take a look at industry publications. If there's a particular industry that you're interested in, Google the professional association, and a lot of times you can subscribe to publications for that industry, and that'll help you get up to speed. It'll help you know who the movers and shakers in that industry are. Um, and then think about current and former coworkers, classmates, or professors. I know when I first got out of college, I would think about networking as, um, this terrifying idea of walking into a giant ballroom where, full of strangers that I'd never met, with like trying to balance like my business cards and a glass of wine and shaking hands and all of that. Felt super awkward. But the reality is that, networking is just about keeping in touch with people that you've met along the way. So I would really recommend that, you get linked in with people in your classes, people that you work with, your neighbors, people that you meet at conferences, because these are people that potentially can help you. People that you work with, they may go on and work for another company that is looking for people, or they can tell you what that industry or that company is like. So these are just some ideas on how you can start to plot that path from figuring out who you are and what you want into the workplace to find the information that you need to find that next job. So I see that that life values inventory has been shared in the chat, which is great. Just looking to see if we've got. Okay, let me see what I have next here. Okay, so next we're going to talk about PAR success stories. And this is all about thinking about success stories that you've had, like whether it's at school, if you're like a student or a recent grad, or if you're more experienced, what are some of the successes that you've had in your career? I call them PAR stories. Some people call them STAR stories, but it's basically the same thing. Like, what was the problem? What situation did you face? What action did you take? And what was the result of that action? And if there's any way to measure the result, like, we decreased the number of steps in a process, we increased revenue by 20%, we reduced we saved X amount of dollars. Like, that's very helpful, not only for your resume, but also when you're interviewing, to be able to talk about the value that you've added in previous situations. So I would encourage you to think of as many success stories as you can. I would challenge you to come up with like 10. Write them down in this, problem, action, result, and practice them. And try to do it in a really concise way. And you can use, well, I'll just go on to the next slide because I talk about how you can use these. So you can use success stories on your resume. You can use them in interviews, when you're networking. You can give examples of things that you've done, and maybe if you want to make a career change or you want to get your foot in the door with a company, if you've got stories about things that you've done, people are interested in that. They want to hear about, and they're going to be listening for like, hey, would this person be a good fit for this organization? You can use these on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, there's an area where you can kind of like talk about yourself. I think it's like the biography area. You can put some examples of your success stories there. You can also use them on social media. So I'm just going to pause here and just see if anybody has any questions about the PAR stories. Okay. Why a maximum of 90 seconds? Catherine, thank you for that question. Um, Mainly, I mean, I would say you can have more detail, but I'm thinking about it when it comes to interviews. A lot of times, people feel like when they go into interviews that they have to explain something in a tremendous amount of detail. And you really, when you're going into interviews, you want those to be conversations. When you're asked a question, you don't even really necessarily know why the interviewer is asking the question. So you don't want to go into a lot of detail if it's probably, they're just looking to say, oh, did this person have experience doing this? So you like draw on one of your success stories, and if you tell it in too much detail, you might be wasting time in the interview that the interviewer wants for other questions. And if they want more details, they'll ask. And I'll just give you a bit of an aside. Like, I was a hiring manager, and I remember one time I had an interview where I interviewed somebody who had a great resume. And I mean, obviously, she was probably nervous, but she came in. I asked one question, and she talked for 15 minutes. And I couldn't even like really cut in. And by the time that I was able to cut in, I just closed the interview down and walked her to the door because she wasn't reading the room. And if you make it a quick answer, they can either say, oh, that's interesting, that's great, and go on to the next question. Or if they want more detail, they can ask a follow-up question. So I hope that was helpful. Okay. Okay, good. It looks like I'm getting a little validation that other people see the PAR stories as helpful. A lot of companies now use what they call behavioral interviewing, which is tell me about a time when you know you were working under a tight deadline. Tell me about a time when you were working with a difficult coworker. Um, so you just want to talk about the problem, the action, the result, and how it was measurable. So I know I said earlier that I was suggesting I would suggest some books that could support this whole process. What Color's Your Parachute is a classic. It was, I think, first published in 1971, and every year they update it, but it has just a ton of exercises on getting to know yourself, understand what you want. And I was lucky enough when I first graduated from William and Mary that somebody gave me What Color's Your Parachute, and they gave me the advice not to start interviewing until I read the book and did all the exercises. And it was so helpful because I probably would have just interviewed for anything and taken the first job that was offered me. But because of this, I was able to narrow my focus down to 2 or 3 areas. And also I was able to interview so much better because I had to do all the the introspection, and I was able to sell myself and get a job in publishing, working in the ad sales department. So, okay, Designing Your Life. This is a great book, and it's not just about career. It's really about looking at your whole life, but it leads you through a number of exercises that are really helpful to find that sweet spot between success and happiness. Winning the Game of Work. That's my book, and the the subtitle in my book is Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms, because so often we're just trying to be successful, but when you can find find that sweet spot between happiness and success, you're going to be able to do your job. You'll just be a lot happier, believe me. I mentioned the Big Leap. That's also about happiness and success. Marshall Goldsmith is a giant in the area of professional development, and his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Often we have success in our background, but we get to a certain place in our life or our career where we have to start doing things differently. And it's important in those times to take a moment and do some introspection. And then finally, this book, Do What You Are. This is actually based on the Myers-Briggs assessment, and if you take a look at that, it's going to make recommendations about certain types of careers that might be a good fit for you based on your Myers-Briggs assessment results. Looks like there's another question here. Do you find LinkedIn Premium useful? I've had it at times, and I don't have it right now, but the thing that's helpful about LinkedIn Premium is that I think you're able to see people who look at your profile. You're also able to send more unsolicited, or I guess, messages to people that you're not linked in with. I think it's probably, if you're in job search, it's probably worth it. And then, maybe when you get a job, if you haven't, you can always drop back down to just the regular LinkedIn. Have you used Strengths Finders 2.0 as a resource? Yes, I have used that as a resource, and I think it's helpful. Um, it's, I mean, I'm sort of a junkie when it comes to assessments, because I don't think that we can ever really know ourselves well enough. And there's this saying that I totally believe in, which is know yourself to lead yourself. The more clearly that you can understand yourself, the more clearly you're going to be able to make the case for yourself when you're interviewing, or even understand yourself to say, like, what direction do I want to go in? I think it's really important to not only you know think with your heart, but also with your head and with your gut too. Because I know for myself, sometimes I tend to be a little too I don't know, willful, like from a mind standpoint. And sometimes I just need to really kind of go to my heart and say, is this something I really want to do? Right? I can do it. I guess if we go back to that slide on the zone of genius, there are things that we can do. And if we're under the pressure to get a new job, we might be like, oh, I can do that. I'm just going to apply for that. Well, sometimes getting a job that you really don't want is just like one of the worst things that could ever happen. um, okay, are there books that you would recommend for returning to work after a long break? I think that, let me see here. I think that What Color's Your Parachute is a great book that, and also Designing Your Life. I mean, any of these actually would be great books to to read and do the exercises for after a break. And also, I would say uh, do some networking. Look for people that have breaks on LinkedIn. Um, and kind of ask them, like, what's it like. So I don't know what industry you work in, but I worked in financial services, and one of the things that they were always they were interested in getting a lot of women back into leadership roles, because a lot of women would leave when they had children, but then a few years later they'd want to come back, and they had some programs to get women to kind of come back into the financial services arena. So you can always look to see if there are any programs like that might be. I don't know what your situation is, but you could just see if there's any programs like that to help with reentry. Let me see what we have here next. Okay, so now we're to the Q&A section. I know people have been asking questions, but we can open it up.
Terry, I was just going to add a few thoughts to some of the questions. I just
Sure.
sent the one with strengths, we did another alumna, Lorraine, who I think one of the coaches out there, did a session back several years ago on discovering your strengths. So if you are interested in the Gallup and StrengthsFinder assessment tool, please do check out that webinar she did on our webinars page. And the other one, iRelaunch, is the organization I recommended to the person that asked about re-entering after some time off. They're a great organization that has a lot of great resources available on their website, iRelaunch, IRELAUNCH. So highly recommend that. I was trying to think, LinkedIn Premium. Certainly there's a lot of great tricks out there. If you didn't catch yesterday's session on LinkedIn, we'll post the recording and you can watch that. I think it will give you some tricks to utilize before paying for the premium. And if you used them all and you're still trying to figure out ways to sort of network in, certainly, use your expenses as you wish. There's a couple questions here where we will post these recordings to the a web page on our site on wmalumni.com, and then we'll share them through email and direct you to those once we get it all posted. There's a couple questions are coming in now. If you want me to ask them, or do you want
Okay, I see.
Okay.
I have an 18-year-old who has no idea what she wants to do. Any ideas to support her? She has Down syndrome. I think that what are things that she likes to do outside of work? And I would just sort of like support her in terms of exploring things that she enjoys doing. When it comes to employment, I mean, it might be like if she's interested in a particular thing, maybe you could see if there are volunteer opportunities that she could take part in. I'm just trying to think. I mean, it's not uncommon at all. And I also think that for a lot of people, there may be some limiting beliefs about what they can do. That's why I think that we go back to that one question of that somebody asked earlier, like how do you counter that feeling of like, oh, I have to make this real. Like just allow yourself, encourage your daughter to just dream. Like a question that I ask people a lot, especially if they're having a hard time, is like, if I gave you a magic wand and you could just wave it and then open your eyes, then you'd be in a situation that you'd enjoy. What does that look like? I mean, it doesn't mean that thing that you imagine is actually what's going to happen, but it gives you a little bit of an inkling of what your heart desires. And you can start there. And then you can start thinking about like, okay, well, if I look around, where are some places where I can have a little bit of that in what I do for a living? Are there resources you recommend for those transitioning out of the military? My brother-in-law's in the Navy, and he's getting ready to retire after having like 22 years in. I know that there are a lot of resources out there, and there are people that actually coach people making that transition from military to civilian life. So you could look for that. There's probably also websites out there that can guide you. But in reality, it's not, I would say any of the books that I recommended, you could use that as a guide for making the transition. Because, people are transitioning all the time, not always out of the military into civilian life, but, people are transitioning to do new industries and so forth. And I'm sure that I haven't been in the military, but I'm sure that there are things that are very, very different, and there are experts out there that specialize in that.
Terry,
Michael, did you have anything?
I'll just add that the William Mary community, the military veteran community, we have some terrific leaders on staff, and programs with faculty and research partnerships, and there are great alumni willing to network and help other military veteran community make that transition. So happy to make some introductions. Whoever, I think it was Pablo asked, so please email me, help connect you to the Association of 1775. They're the alumni network of military and veteran community, and they are very supportive to one another and helping that transition. So there's also additional resources I can point you towards, but I think networking is really critical in that.
Yeah, it looks like Jennifer Karnowski put for military act now, and also that LinkedIn Premium provides 1 year free for military and military spouses. So that's great. Okay, question about what are the best email subject lines to reach out to someone to hear more about their industry, career, profession in a way to have a networking conversation. The best subject line is Michael Steelman or Terry McDougall suggested I reach out. If you can network to find somebody that is in like that you have a mutual connection with, that is the best way. When I'm introducing people in my network, I will send a message. I'll send one email to both of them, and I will say, Emma, meet Michael, and I'll just say I'm introducing you for whatever reason, whatever the reason. Like a lot of times I'll say, you work in the same industry, or I think that you would benefit from meeting each other, and then I'll just give like a brief, like Emma is graduating from William and Mary this year, and she's interested in, whatever. And then Michael is the head of, alumni, whatever. Michael, sorry, I don't know exactly what your title is. But I'll make that introduction, and then it's easier for the people to like just respond and say, oh, Terry, thank you for the introduction. Emma, I'll reach out to you and we can set up a coffee. That's the absolute best way. Like it's almost 100%, because if I've reached out to both people and they're like, yeah, I'm interested, they will connect. If you don't have somebody that can connect you, just something like, I've had people from William and Mary who graduated 20 years after me reach out and say, fellow W&M alum, reaching out, something like that, where I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued, and then they'll just tell me why they want to talk with me, and I'm open to that. And let's see, what are good questions to ask during the conversation? Well, I mean, what do you want to know? That's like, I'm asking you, what do you want to know? Like people have said to me, when I worked in banking, they would just say, hey, I'm interested in getting into investment banking. I see that you work in that. I'd love to talk to you about, what your company's like, or, what your path has been like, whatever. But, some questions I'll ask people if they admire someone's career is to ask them, tell me, how did you get to where you are? What are some, what advice would you have for somebody like me who might want to follow a similar career path? What are the most, surprising things about your industry? Because sometimes, or role, sometimes certain jobs can look one way from the outside, but when you talk to somebody who's an insider, they'll tell you the real deal about, maybe there might be some myths about what working in that industry or that in that type of career is like. Okay, let's see. Okay, did I come across any YouTubers that I recommend? No, I mean, I will look on YouTube for things, but I don't like really follow anybody. But I do think that, Chris, that's a great potential avenue, is just to go to YouTube and, just type something in like, hey, what's it like working in investment banking? What's it like working in advertising? What's the best first job for somebody who wants to do X? The internet is just a treasure trove.
That might be the last question I'm seeing. At least I've been reviewing the chats as well. Oh, somebody put in a few career coaches on YouTube that they recommend. Madeline Mann. So there's one name. Terry, as always, thank you so much. I know Kelly will come on, there she is, to close things out. But thank you as always. And I encourage everyone that's watching today and in the recording to stay in touch and follow Terry. Her podcast and her book is great. Oh, we have one more before I'll go off. I'll let Kelly take this after you answer this question. So
Okay. Is there another question? Okay, I'm
there's
not
one more
seeing
question.
it.
It says, do you have any recommendations on how to leverage the chat GPT during the process? The AI.
Oh, um, I'm a little bit I've checked out Chat GPT a little bit, but I don't really have any recommendations on it. I mean, it's amazing the things that you can do with it. Like you could probably go out and say, I'd like 10 questions that I should ask during a networking conversation, and they'd probably give you those things. Or what's the best path to, pivot from X to Y. I would just test it, honestly, because it is pretty cool. I just haven't had a chance to really do more than a couple things with it, so I can't really speak to it as an expert.
It's definitely a new technology that people in social media and podcasters are exploring and looking for more ways to share how to use it. But I think it's so new that nobody's an expert on it yet as to how it can be something to take advantage of, or maybe something to be leery of. But Terry, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with the full William & Mary community today. We really appreciate you putting in the effort to prepare your session today with some great exercises for self-reflection. And to all of the participants on today's webinar, we expect you've already started the process of assessing yourself with the SOAR exercise, and we encourage you to continue with that. And I provided some links in the chat for some next steps that you can continue and take further into your self-assessment. These slides, as well as those from yesterday's sessions, will be available soon on the full event website and in the recap messages. And so, as Michael mentioned, if you're interested in learning more about the tricks on LinkedIn, that session was titled How to Recession Proofing Your Career. And that was provided by a former staff member from LinkedIn who created the alumni tool within LinkedIn. And he gave some great strategies on how to optimize your profile and how to really take advantage of that tool. And there's even more. I know someone asked about YouTubers. One of our speakers yesterday, Kirsten Jones, shared several podcasts that she finds helpful for motivation and preparation. So definitely follow up with those recordings and slides in the coming weeks. As Michael mentioned in the beginning of the session, throughout the week, we are incorporating the NACE career competencies, and today's focus has really been on career and self-development and critical thinking. You can see a full list of the competency connections on the Learning Objectives page of the Professional Development Week website, as well as link to your follow-up emails this week and next. When the meeting closes, you'll have access to a quick survey so you can share your thoughts on this portion of the William & Mary Professional Development Week. But we really want to make sure that you do take some time today to highlight some of the notes you've gotten from Terry's session and write down 1 to 3 things that you are going to take action on for yourself in the coming weeks to continue your own professional development. We have great sessions coming up throughout the rest of this week, and you can see the schedule of those, the full schedule of those on the Professional Development Week website. But I want to make sure that we note the final event of the week on Friday, March 3rd at noon Eastern Time is a professional networking online hour. You've taken advantage of learning from members of the William & Mary community. So now we want to make sure that you take the time to connect one-on-one with members of the William & Mary community, and you'll be able to do that Friday afternoon. Thank you so much, Terry, and everyone have a great week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.